Good afternoon. I'm Dara Bunjon. I'm the food enthusiast here at J More Living. I'm a food writer, food stylist, PR maven, and a very frustrated baker. Those of you joining us live today, drop your questions into the comment box and you'll see me turn my head and check from time to time. Today's guest is Bryan Bernstein, a chef by schooling, currently the marketing manager for Saval Foodservice. That is the largest independent broadline food distributor serving re- independent restaurant trade in the Mid-Atlantic region from Roanoke, Virginia to parts of Pennsylvania. The former chairman of the board of Restaurant Association of Maryland Education Foundation and board member of the Restaurant Association of Maryland. And also, Bryan is a culinary advisor on the board for DC Central Kitchen. Let's welcome Bryan.
Hi there. How are you today?
I am doing great, and I thank you for sharing time with us. And what's on your plate today other than the show?
So I am looking to do a food show coming up in April on the Eastern Shore, so working diligently on that.
Okay, so that is, I know that they're having the restaurant show in Ocean City in March, but your good Savil's going to be doing their own show, correct?
Yes, correct. So we attend that Ocean City Hotel Motel Restaurant Show, which is March 5th and 6th this year, and we will have a show that follows that sometime early April.
I want people to get some background on you, and I think most importantly, right now you're a marketing manager at Saval Food, and you started off in what position? And can you tell us more about the history of Saval?
Sure. So let's start off with the history of Saval. We were founded in 1932. Last year was our 90th anniversary. We are a deli manufactured and further processed entrees. And about in the late 80s, we found this building here in Elkridge, where we currently are, which is a warehouse. We have our manufacturing facility, which is in downtown Baltimore. We have a slicing facility, which is where we cut our deli meats into smaller packaging, which is in Lansdowne. And this year, we are opening a new facility, which is around the corner from us at Troy Hill, which will have our produce and cut steaks locally to us instead of out of the manufacturing facility for the cut steaks and the produce market where produce is currently. So we, over the years when I was, I guess, started here in 2004, I was the corporate chef for Saval. It was a new position that I was hired for, and it was really growing our customer base. We were a deli manufacturer. We had started in the world of pizza and Italian, and we were trying to grow into the next realm, which would be mid-tier dining, family dining, fine dining. And the goal there was to make sure there wasn't voids within our portfolio of products to be able to sell every single restaurant that we walked in the door to. And at the time when I started here, there was basic ingredients that we still had yet to had in our inventory for our sales reps to sell. So I started in a world that I was consulting Saval on product line as well as our customers to help them stay profitable by looking at their menu, helping them with the P&Ls, understanding recipe development and costing and the science of menus. So that was in 2004. In 2012, there's a void here in the marketing, and marketing is kind of a nomenclature for what I actually do here, in the sense that I'm not actually forward marketing to our customers and the public. It's internal for our sales reps and things that we do for marketing material to help sell the products that we have. I also in charge of margin, so all the profitability of the company and the costing. I work with purchasing to make sure that the dollars make sense so that this company stays profitable. So that's the beginning and the end of where we are. And there's lots of other hats that I've worn for so many years here, helping in the warehouse and trucks and deliveries, as well as I did a lot of training originally when I was the chef as well, being front and center with the sales reps and introducing them to our product lines, working with our suppliers and broker world, which is kind of a hidden world of food service and retail, where there's liaisons from the manufacturers to the customer, whether it's the retail side or the
Right.
distributor, and they are the information people and the people that help sell that product.
And just, Savile has a rich history starting out, what Baltimore calls corned beef row in that area. And they started with the corned beef, the pastrami's, and that's how the business started. And now, fourth generation of the Saviles. I know that Paul is president. His son is now involved, correct?
That is correct. Brian Saval is vice president. He is not here today, but our windows, which you can't see in front of me, is we face each other all day long and work together.
Terrific, terrific. With everything that has gone on now with COVID, I know that Savile opened up a retail shop to help during those times. The restaurant scene has the landscape's changed. Am I correct? I mean, it's a different animal at this point from what it was prior to. Is there anything specific beyond um, keeping a leaner menu? What are some of the other things that you're seeing?
Yeah, so restaurants became very dynamic, obviously, during COVID when they finally got to reopen. The reality is that the restaurants couldn't serve what they typically would serve to their customers, so they were found incredible ways to ship things to people's homes so they could have a good meal that was restaurant quality that wasn't at the restaurant but at their houses. So what would be packaged appropriately and how would it travel was a big consideration. So you saw less French fries and such of the old style and more coated fries, or the soup world kind of dissipated a bit on what was traveling because those could spill or leak, and that wasn't always good for the person driving. Um, the reality, like you just said, having a smaller menu that was deeper on the same items, cross utilized across the menus was more important. Not knowing what was going to sell, so having the variety of menu options, but having fewer proteins on the menu might have been more well suited for each of the customers, so that the restaurant stayed good with what they were selling.
Right. Um, let's get back to your history. I wanted to focus on Savile because they're a well-known name in the tri-state or Delaware, along with Maryland, DC, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. They're a well-known name, and especially the deli meats. I love the brisket, the best corned beef and brisket you can get at any deli. Um, let's talk about a little bit of your history. You grew up in Baltimore. You grew up in Pikesville neighborhood. You left Pikesville High School. You went off to, what was it, Ithaca?
I went to college, yes.
And you got a degree in biology.
I did.
Yes. What was the inspiration to switch careers and go to the Culinary Institute of America? Did you just wake up and say, I want to cook? Mom was a great cook. What was the impetus? What made you change and go that path?
Yeah, so good question. I ask myself that sometimes as well. So I when I was in high school, before I drove, my mom used to drive me to the Pimlico Hotel where I worked as a busboy. So my early in my days when I was late 14 years old, I was working there and got the taste for the restaurants. However, when I graduated Ithaca, my reality was I wanted to continue doing research. I was doing genetic research,
Right.
and was looking to go to California, and I did, and I stayed there for longer than I should have because I never got that job that I was looking for. The UC system had laid off many people, and I was competing with PhDs. But the end result was that I didn't go to medical school quick enough because my prerequisites expired. So I needed to go back to college and take my 100 classes again, which I did not want to do. So that's how I ended up in restaurants. I was here working with lots of career counseling, trying to figure out what to do. And my background always had been in the restaurants. So I went to the CIA, Culinary Institute
Well,
of America in upstate New York.
yeah, it's considered the Harvard of culinary schools. That is the culinary school to go to. And it cost almost as much as Harvard, I think, these days. But at that time, was that the 2-year program?
It was a 2-year program. That is correct.
Okay. So CIA, you come out of CIA. Did you know whether you wanted to work the line, work in the kitchen? Where did you go from that graduation to restaurants?
Yes. So I really wanted to go to Europe. My dream was to own a restaurant and have all the experiences I could. I grew up as a for the majority of my late teens into my late 20s as a vegan. Even during culinary school, I tasted things just for seasoning, but I had to learn a lot more than the average person because of my background wasn't in meats, which is typical for most chefs. So when I looked to go abroad, there's a company that good enough for me was in Columbia, Maryland, called AIPT, which took people from around the world with any kind of technology or hands-on skills and placed them throughout the world. So that you could come to the U.S. as much as going far away. The hardest places to go were the most obvious. You go into Italy, France, Spain, Japan was not available. It was like a 2-year waiting list. You had to be a student when you were accepted. So I had to apply for it while I was still in school. And long story is, I was able to go to Germany. So my first job out of school was in a small resort town of Lindau at the Hotel Bad Schachen, which was a beautiful on the lake between Austria and Switzerland in Germany.
Um, Now, I'm trying to remember, we had talked when we start getting you lined up for the show. Were you working at Savannah's at that time before you went to Germany?
I was not. So that was Savannah's. Was still open. I think I ate dinner there with my family one night, and I remember speaking to Cindy Wolf saying that if and when I get back to Baltimore, I'd love to have the opportunity to work with her. And at that point, her comment was, "Come see me. We'll see." So it was a very funny introduction. I think it was the first time I was exposed to her when she was still at Savannah.
Well, just to tell people who are tuning in that are not from Baltimore, Cindy Wolf has been nominated numerous times as the best chef in the Mid Atlantic region and is considered the premier chef in Baltimore. I don't mean to insult any of the other chefs. It's just that she is committed to. I remember working on a cooking class with her and how committed she was in what she was doing. So, Charleston restaurant here in Baltimore is now considered the prime or the premier restaurant to go to. You were there and you were telling me you were you ended up being chef de cuisine. Can you explain to people and maybe what a sous chef is and the difference of chef de cuisine to a sous chef?
Right. So there's a brigade in the kitchen, and it starts from the dishwasher up to the person running the ship, which would be the chef. Sometimes it's the corporate chef or executive chef. Cindy was owner executive chef there, and then she had her right hand person, which was the chef de cuisine. And the sous chef would fall underneath of that person. You'd have your line cooks, and then you'd have your prep cooks and dishwashers. Is the way it would go from top to bottom.
Right. So I remember you saying as at that time when you were cooking, line cooks earned $7 an hour. And you at chef de cuisine, working many more hours, earned $40,000. And weren't you working at, you were helping out in another restaurant? Was it Razorbacks?
I was. My friend was the chef at Razorbacks, and I was only making $40,000, which is not a lot of money, obviously, a lot more than than it is today. And I was working under the table there, helping them run their morning shift to get them open. So I didn't have to come in until 12:30 or 1 o'clock. So I worked from 7 till 1 at the one location in Canton and ran to Fells Point to work my sous chef, line cook each time, whatever it was for Cindy.
Okay, so now we're going to go to the next step. I met you working at, was it City Cafe? That is now Tark's. Was it
It was
City Cafe?
actually it was when you met me. I think it was still called Town Hall, and then it was City Crab and Seafood Company.
Okay.
It's the
So,
same location where City Cafe purchased that, which was Tark's at the time.
right. Okay. So we met then when I was selling for Vans and you bought the spices um, through a distributor at that time. And I just remember us talking. That's when we first became acquainted, but our paths have crossed many times. I was on the board for Restaurant Association Maryland Education Foundation. And why don't you tell people a little bit more about that?
So the Restaurant Association of Maryland Education Foundation does lots of different things, but the biggest aspect that I really have always cherished is the students in high school that are part of culinary programs called Pro Start. Pro
Right.
Start is a program that's nationwide through the NRA, and we have the quantity of schools change, but somewhere around 70 schools now. I think the most we've had were 100, and the resources there are typical. It's hard to get in touch with the local schools through the principal because you can't just touch the teachers. So it's a great program that there's a lot of opportunity with that the Restaurant Association does to help support them. We have car raffles and different things that they do. And lots of different events. And then there's the other side of that, which is the Restaurant Association of Maryland, which does lots of things, whether it's on Capitol Hill or in Annapolis, on the rights for restaurants to help improve the everything that they need through legislation and whatnot. So there's a person there that I work directly with on the distribution side, how it affects us to the restaurant side, but the education foundation dear to my heart because it's the kids that ultimately get the opportunity to come back into the careers of food service.
And, I think you're a good example that just because you have a degree in culinary doesn't mean that you're in the kitchen cooking on the line. There are many, many paths for someone to go in the hospitality industry. I think you did some research and development. Didn't you do R&D for a while?
So I assisted at Saval. I did that. We have an R&D side to it. In my early years here, I worked directly with them often, and I was there a half a day a week working with the head guy there, Thomas. The reality is that because something tastes good or it works well for us doesn't mean it always works well for the consumer, whether it's the restaurant or the retail segment. And it, it, it needs to be diverse enough that it can open the doors and eyes to lots of people.
Okay. So always a supporter of educating and getting people into a skill set. And I think you were very much involved with DC Central Kitchen. I remember at one of their big cook-offs in DC, their big fundraiser. I know Jose Andreas was very much involved, and he probably still is, but he's now World Central Kitchen rather than DC Central Kitchen. That you were, working with them and helping and serving as a supporter. What else were you doing for DC Central Kitchen?
So I was on their culinary advisory board. They have a training center at their location where they feed schools and homeless. So they have the need for teachers to teach classes along with their staff that does all the production. So I worked. It was I believe it was 12-week program for the culinary where they had life coaches. A lot of the people were out of from prisons and just off the street, unfortunate situations. So I typically did fish butchery or stocks or something like that, teaching them skills so that they could get a job. There's a job coach at the end as well that gets them into different real life situations as training so that they can get back on their feet. I was also for the DC Central Kitchen. It's a DC food fight. I was there for its first year for about 12 years. Fascinating, huge benefit to help that kitchen. They had people donating $1 million at one time at just standing there and hand up $1 million, kind of putting it out there. Jose Andres, the man that he is, knows a lot of people. He was the beginning of his world back then, growing. But we had Anthony Bourdain, rest his soul, every year as a head person there. So it was nice to be around him, and they brought just lots of celebrities there. So it was a huge event in DC. Typically, it was at the Ronald Reagan Building after the first year, and it's moved on since then.
Well, I was when it was at the Ronald Reagan Building because of bands, we had donated the spices for the competition kitchen.
Yep.
And I remember it was fascinating, all the celebrities who were there. I remember Bourdain. I can't remember who else was there at the time. And obviously Jose, some of local chefs. It might have been Riz Lacoste
Mm-hmm.
was there.
And they all
I
competed as well. So that was the fun
Yeah,
thing. It was a little chef on chef 10-minute competition.
right, absolutely. Um, I know you have two children, a daughter and a son. Are any of them leaning towards culinary?
Well, I would definitely say my daughter over my son. My son has challenged just putting milk on his cereal as much as he likes to eat it. My daughter will experiment and gets upset when I don't include her sometimes. So she does always ask to have a meal as much as possible for her to cook for the family. Um, so it's typically something that she saw on TikTok and enjoys to create. So yes, she did something actually funny at Hebrew school yesterday. His Kamuna, Chef Annie, had their class making Hamantashes, and she texted me saying, "I'm working with Chef Annie. I know you know her, and we're making Hamantashes."
That's great. That's great. So I have a question for you from the person we talked about was going to send a question. You ready?
I'm
You
ready.
mentioned foods that worked well, tasted good at Saval. Can you give an example of something that failed in the marketplace?
Yeah, we have a lot of failures. There's a lot of things that we always say we can make. The reality is that because you can create it in production, doesn't mean that a chef in a restaurant might want to buy it. So there's things like we make a house-made meatloaf here. We sell it to a lot of retail entities. The restaurants just don't gravitate to it because they believe that they can make their own meatloaf and be creative themselves. So we don't sell it. So it's something that we don't have in inventory here versus what the consumer really enjoys because the retail entities sell it. So I think that that's a failure of differentiation between retail and restaurant. But we do have other products that we try often that just don't make it.
Right?
I'm not coming up with a great idea, but I will reach
That's
out to that
okay.
person on the side and give them more information.
Okay. All right. My screen keeps freezing up if you see me reaching over here. Um, you know, there's we talked about Savile and uh, a ways back. I had Jeremy Diamond on, who wrote a book. It's called The Legacy of Jewish Entrepreneurs in the Mid-Atlantic Grocery Industry. And he wrote about Savile. I'm just going to hold it up like that. It was very interesting as to the background of Savile and some of the other distributors, and the supermarkets were all how many grew from this small area. That's just making a statement. All right, so we've come to the point of the show where I ask my famous 4 or 5 questions, but I have one that was not on the list. I saw in your CV that you enjoy wine and bourbon. And if my husband was alive, he would say, "What's your favorite bourbon?"
So that's a trick question. So is it a favorite bourbon or is it a favorite bourbon that I can't afford? Because there's two different realms there. So
So why don't you give us an answer on both?
So I've been drinking High Street recently, the double rye. It's always been a favorite, just an easy drink. But I do like the different. It's a brand called Barrel. They have single barrel strength that I've been enjoying over the past couple years.
Okay. And that's the one, or which is that the one
So
that's
the
a little
barrel
bit?
would be more expensive. I mean,
Okay.
it's gonna break the bank for a bottle, but it's not gonna be the really expensive Pappy or anything like that that's available. So it's be probably a $90 to $200 bottle, depending on which one you get.
Okay. All right. Now for the real questions. If you wake up tomorrow with a new talent, what would that new talent be?
Um, so I would think that it's not a new talent for me, but it's a talent that I lost in the kitchens because of how fast-paced everything was, and that talent would be patience.
Okay. What's the best bite you've had all week?
So that's probably not what anybody would be thinking, but I was at a concert on Saturday night with a bunch of friends from college that I have not seen in a long time, and after the concert, my friend had a bag of mandarin oranges. And I remember after dancing and the heat of that concert, it was the most refreshing orange that I think I've had. It was just so sweet and juicy. It was perfect at the moment.
And you know what? Sometimes the people and the situation that we're in makes things taste better. There's
That's right.
a whole memory that goes with it. I know there's probably been more than one, maybe two. What was your ultimate culinary fail?
So I would think that I have two. One, um, early in my career, it was a Sunday evening and I was doing a dinner. It was probably 30 or 40 people, and somebody returned one of their dinner plates, which was chicken. And the waiter said, "I don't know what's wrong with it, but they think it's undercooked." So we looked at it, and of course, it was white and juicy, and I didn't really know what to do at the moment because it looked as good as one would think a breast of chicken would be. And what occurred after that was the failure was everybody saw that one person return the chicken, and everybody that had chicken started returning it. And I froze. I didn't know what to do. And the reality was, it was Sunday. We were limited with how much food we had. And I think we didn't have any chicken breast left that wasn't marinated for fried chicken. And I think for that dinner, I ultimately fed the rest of the people that brought back the plates because I couldn't reheat any of them because the waiters brought them back without name and seat number to bring them back to a table. So we ended up frying chicken for this fine dining dinner for this party. And they ultimately enjoyed it and thought it was great and very funny versus what they had originally. Um, but
You
yeah,
said there was two. So the
so
second,
the other one, it was the beginning of my school career at the CIA. I told you I was vegan, and so my background in baking, it was for a pastry class. I had to do this grand buffet, and I ended up doing a vegan desserts, and it was not a thing at the CIA. They did not do vegan very well, so I was doing eggless and dairy-free cheesecakes and pastries and all this stuff, and they thought they got hoodwinked at school because they all loved it and didn't understand that it wasn't what they thought they were eating, even though it was very clear because I had to order all the food through the system. So I got tofu and all the things that I needed to make the cheesecake and the culinary cream that was made to put on top, which was made with agar and different things that were not meat worthy of them. So I had to go sit in the dean's office and explain myself. And I was ultimately given demerits for doing what I did, even though everybody enjoyed it. It wasn't what they were asking for.
huh, okay. Let's see. We've done, okay. If you could go back and give your 18-year-old self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Yeah, so I think the first would be to follow my heart and make sure that I understand that because I follow my heart, there might be sacrifices with some of the decisions that I make. And the other would be very clear, knowing my path and what I know now versus then, is that I wish I learned about PR firms and understanding how that could have boosted my career earlier instead of the accolades that the papers and the people that I met across my way gave to me. The PR firm probably would have given a much bigger earlier boost to where I was in the restaurants.
Right. We were having a little bit of that discussion, you know, earlier, because I do PR on the side. Right now, it's if I know the person. It's I do the show, find my guests, study up, but it's a little bit different now with influencers. What it was 20 years ago, what it is now, and 5 years from now, whoever the influencers are, there's going to be something new and they'll be by the wayside. It's just evolution. Okay. What didn't I ask you that I should have?
Um, best food experience that I ever had.
Okay. What's the
Something
best
fun.
food? Tell us.
I can think of many. How about two? So you mentioned Jose Andres. So I got lucky. I called him up one night and said I need a reservation for two at Mini Bar, which is this tasting. It was in Cafe Atlantico upstairs at the time. It had 6 seats only, and they had a team of chefs cooking for you. It was 29 bite-size portions. Unfortunately, Allie was pregnant with my daughter at the time, so she didn't get to enjoy the beverages of the evening. But the intense flavors that he had to offer and the enjoyment of each bite that went into our mouths, that the time that those chefs took to create was just over the top. It was amazing.
It's fabulous. I actually went twice.
Oh, good for you. Yes, it would be
The,
something to do again.
yeah, the first time I went with Nona Nielsen Parker and Betty Legenhausen. And it was on a Sunday, and at that time, it's how many years ago? I think it was $65. Um, and Jose came in. He had just flown in. He knew I was there. He knew me through Vans. He's standing behind talking to us, the chef. And the first thing they served us, there was a atomizer and a Chinese takeout carryout box. And in the box was popcorn with desiccated curried chicken powder on it. And in the atomizer was a mojito, and you're supposed to eat the popcorn and spray. I remember that first bite.
Yep.
All right, so that was your first. What was your second favorite food experience?
So Allie, my wife, and I went to Paris. My son was very young at the time. I know we were questioning whether we should even go, but we stayed in the sixth arrondissement and near Saint Germain, and the hotel, which was called Le Hotel de l'Abbaye, which is then soon there in World Travel or one of those big magazines that started promoting it. But the hotel concierge told us to go to this restaurant, Les Maisons du Jardin, which was just a neighborhood restaurant around the corner. And we were tired, so we just walked over there that night. And it was some of the finest fare that I could remember. It was just home style, French cooking at its finest. Simple, delicious. The wine that had no name just came out of the barrel. And I think we ate there 3 times. We got rid of some of these high-end restaurants that were on our list to go that we had reservations for just because we had such a great time. I think it only had probably 6 or 7 tables there, but they were super friendly, especially since we didn't speak French as well as we needed to understand. But we thought it was great, and we've had so many friends since then go back and say how good it still is.
Yeah, sometimes you just find that perfect place.
Yes.
So have you been back to Paris since?
We talk about it a lot, but no. It was my 3rd time going, and it's been as long as since my first time I've ever been back. So I
Yeah.
can't wait to go.
Well, Bryan Bernstein, everybody, you can check out Saval Food, savalfood.com. A lot of the links are up here. And if you want to learn more about the Restaurant Association of Maryland Education Foundation, just go to the Restaurant Association of Maryland and follow that link. And the same thing with DC Central Kitchen. You can reach out and find out and see if you can donate or help out. Bryan, as always, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And I'm going to give you my big moi and wish you only the best and hope to see you in person very soon.
Thank you very much for the time today. You as well.
You're welcome. Okay, everyone. Next week's guest is Rachel Reederman, author, photographer of the just released book called Once Upon a Rind, R-I-N-D, in Hollywood. Once Upon a Rind in Hollywood. 50 movie-themed cheese platters and snack boards for film fanatics. Forget popcorn, these movie-themed platters are tastier treats. Think, may the fromage be with you. I'll have Varty, what she's having, When Harry Met Sally. Here's Looking at You, Curd, Casablanca. Roquefort Horror Picture Show, The Rocky Horror Show, and more. It's a fun book. I deal with the Oscars coming out on March 12th. Plenty of time to get the book. And so tune in. Anyone you would like me to have on the show, please reach out. You can reach me at food@jmoreliving.com or Instagram at Dara Cooks. All these shows are immediately archived up in video form on JMOR's Facebook page and jmoreliving.com. Feel free to dig into our video archives of past shows. We truly appreciate when you share our show with friends and family. And as I always like to say, may your plates always remain full. I look forward to seeing you next Thursday. Have a good week.